The emergency klaxons blared through the massive crystalline halls of the Galactic Council station, their piercing wail echoing off walls that had stood for over 1,000 years. In the center of the great chamber, Ambassador Dexari of the Kelvani Union stood before the holographic projectors, his normally pristine blue scales now dulled with exhaustion and fear. Dark circles rimmed his large amber eyes as he struggled to maintain his composure. For 3 days, he had been pleading with the council members, begging for military aid that never came. The elegant representatives from dozens of species sat in their floating observation pods, their faces showing everything from pity to cold indifference. The Altarians claimed their fleets were engaged elsewhere. The Zentarian Republic spoke of budget constraints. The Vegan Collective simply stated that the Ravager threat was not their concern. The Xari's communication aide, a younger Kelvani named Victor, approached with trembling hands. Ambassador, our last transmission from Kelvani Prime was received 14 minutes ago. The orbital defense platforms have gone silent. The ambassador's scaled hands clenched into fists. His homeworld, the crown jewel of their civilization, is dying while politicians debated and bureaucrats shuffled papers. He had spent his entire career believing in the power of diplomacy and the strength that came from unity among the stars. But now, facing the end of everything he held dear, those beliefs crumbled like ancient stone. Open an emergency broadcast channel, he commanded, his voice carrying new steel. All frequencies, maximum power. I don't care if it violates communication protocols. Vector S. eyes widened. Sir, the Council has strict rules about unauthorized transmissions. They could revoke our membership, impose sanctions. What membership? Dexari laughed bitterly. What sanctions matter when there's no one left to sanction? The holographic display flickered to life, showing the tactical situation in stark, terrifying detail. Red markers indicated Ravager horde positions spreading like an infection across the star map. What had once been 17 thriving worlds now showed as dead zones, their populations consumed, their resources stripped bare, their very atmospheres converted into breeding grounds for more of the insectoid. Nightmares Dexari activated the transmission array, knowing this would likely be his final act as a representative of his people. His voice, steady now with desperate resolve, began to broadcast across the galaxy. To anyone receiving this transmission, this is Ambassador Dexari of the Kelvani Union. We are dying. The Ravager horde has consumed 17 of our worlds. In the past solar cycle, our energy shields, our most advanced technology, mean nothing to them. Our plasma cannons barely slow their advance. He paused, watching the real-time feeds from his homeworld. Massive bioships, each one a living nightmare of chitin and flesh, descended through the atmosphere like falling meteors. Where they landed, the very ground began to change, transforming from familiar soil and rock into something alien and hungry. They don't just kill, he continued, his voice growing raw. They consume, they transform. Every person they take becomes part of their collective consciousness. Every building they touch becomes a hive. They turn our own world against us, hundreds of light years away in the depths of space near the asteroid belt designated as mining. Zone 7, the human exploration vessel Iron Dawn drifted silently among the floating rocks. The ship was a testament to human engineering philosophy, built less for beauty than for functionality. Its hull was scarred from countless missions, reinforced with armor plating that spoke of encounters with hostile forces. Captain Li Dongmin sat in his command chair, reviewing supply reports with the kind of methodical patience that had kept him alive through 15 years of military service. At 38, he was young for a deep space captain, but his record spoke for itself. 3 tours with the Terran Defense Corps, 2 commendations for valor, and 1 incident that officially never happened but had earned him the quiet respect of every soldier. Who knew the real story? The bridge around him hummed with quiet efficiency. His crew of 12 were all veterans, men and women, who had chosen the dangerous life of deep space exploration over the safer postings available back in Earth's solar system. They were miners, engineers, and soldiers who had found purpose in the vast emptiness between stars. Her communications officer, Park So-young, looked up from her station. her usually cheerful expression now serious. At 26, she was the youngest member of the crew, but her skills with alien communication protocols had saved them from diplomatic incidents more times than Lee could count. "Sir, I'm picking up something unusual." "Emergency broadcast? Maximum power coming from the direction of the Galactic Council station."
Ow.
Lee's attention sharpened. Emergency broadcasts were rare, and ones with enough power to reach human space were almost unheard of. "Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled to life with uxorious, desperate plea, as the alien ambassador described the Ravager advance. Lee felt a familiar chill run down his spine. He had seen this before. During the Martian colony wars, when the bioengineered weapons had gotten out of control, Lieutenant Commander Kim Taho, Lee's second command, moved closer to the tactical display. The older man's face bore the scars of too many battles, including the distinctive mark left by Centaurian acid weapons. His expression grew grim as he processed the tactical data being transmitted with the distress call. "Jesus, Captain," Kim muttered, studying the enemy movement patterns. "Look at this advance pattern. They're not just conquering territory, they're systematically consuming entire ecosystems." Engineer Choi Min-ho, monitoring the technical specifications from his engineering station, shook his head in amazement. "Ow. The energy readings are off the charts. These bioships are converting matter at the molecular level. They're literally eating planets." Cart continued monitoring the transmission, her fingers dancing across her console as she tracked the signal's path. "Sir, this broadcast is going out to everyone. Every species, every government, every military organization in known space." "Any responses?" Lee asked. "Nothing, sir."
Ow.
Radio silence across all frequencies. The captain stood, moving to the large view screen that dominated the bridge's forward wall. Outside, the asteroids drifted in their eternal dance, indifferent to the drama playing out across the galaxy. But Lee's mind was already working, calculating distances, supply requirements, and tactical possibilities. "Kim, what's our current armament status?" "Standard exploration package, sir. Mining charges, defensive systems, and enough firepower to handle pirates or hostile wildlife. Nothing that would make a difference against something like this." "What about our manufacturing capabilities?" Kim's scarred face showed a glimmer of understanding. "We've got the fabrication bay, full chemical processing, and enough raw materials to outfit a small army." "Why?" Lee's smile was cold and calculating, the expression of a man who had spent years turning impossible situations into victories. "Because, old friend, it looks like we're about to go into the extermination business." Park looked up from her station, confusion clear on her young face. "Sir, we don't have authorization from Earth Command for any kind of military action. This is way outside our jurisdiction." "Since when?" Lee replied, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had made him a legend in certain military circles. "Do we need permission to exterminate pests?" The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance, unaware that somewhere in the vast darkness, humanity was about to remind the galaxy why Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. The Iron Dawn shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, the familiar blue glow of the jump drive fading from the viewport. Captain Lee Dongman gripped his command chair as the ship's artificial gravity systems compensated for the sudden deceleration. After 3 days of maximum burn through hyperspace, they had finally reached the Kelvani home system. What greeted them was a vision straight from humanity's darkest nightmares. The once beautiful blue world of Kelvani Prime hung before them like a diseased organ. Dark, pulsing veins of organic matter covered entire continents, spreading across the planet's surface in twisted patterns that hurt to look at. The familiar white clouds had been replaced by a sickly green atmosphere that swirled with unnatural currents. "Mother of God," breathed Communications Officer Park So-young, her face pale as she stared at the main view screen. "What have they done to that planet?" Engineer Choi Min-ho hunched over his sensor console, his usually steady hands trembling as he processed the incoming data. The readings were unlike anything in Earth's databases. Captain, the entire planetary surface is showing massive biological activity. It's like the whole world has been turned into one giant living organism. Lieutenant Commander Kim Tae-ho joined them at the tactical station, his scarred face grim as he studied the enemy positions. Massive bioships, each one easily the size of a small moon, drifted in orbit around the dying world. Their surfaces weren't made of metal or composite materials like normal spacecraft. Instead, they appeared to be grown, their hulls rippling with organic tissue that pulsed with alien life. Jesus Christ, Kim muttered, counting the hostile contacts. There are at least 30 of those things in orbit. Each one could carry millions of those bug creatures. Lee moved to the forward viewport, pressing his palm against the reinforced glass as he studied their enemy. In his 15 years of military service, he had faced pirates, rebels, and even the nightmarish bioweapons that had nearly consumed Mars. But this was different. This was an enemy that didn't just want to conquer or destroy. It wanted to transform everything they touched into something alien and wrong. Choi, give me detailed scans of those bioships, Lee ordered. Want to know everything about their structure, their defensive capabilities, and how they reproduce. The young engineer's fingers danced across his console. Sir, the readings are incredible. These ships aren't built, they're grown. The whole material appears to be some kind of living chitin, reinforced with metallic compounds they've absorbed from consumed spacecraft. They're constantly regenerating, adapting, evolving. What about weapons? Kim asked. That's the scary part. Choi replied, his voice tight with tension. They don't have weapons in the traditional sense. They fire living projectiles, biological acid, and some kind of neural disruptor that can take control of electronic systems. Park suddenly straightened. At her communications station, Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the surface. It's weak, but I can clean it up, put it through. The bridge speakers crackled with static, then cleared to reveal the desperate voice of Ambassador Vexari. The alien diplomat sounded exhausted, his once proud voice now cracked with despair and fading hope. This is Ambassador Vexari broadcasting from Emergency Bunker 7 beneath the capital city. If anyone can hear this transmission, please respond. We have perhaps hours before the Ravagers breach our final defenses. Lee stepped forward, activating the ship's communication array. Ambassador Vexari, this is Captain Lee Dongmin of the Terran vessel Iron Dawn. We received your distress call and have come to provide assistance. The silence that followed lasted so long that Lee wondered if the transmission had been cut. Then Nexari's voice returned, filled with an emotion that needed no translation across species barriers. Captain Lee, thank the stars. We had given up hope that anyone would answer our call. But I must warn you, these creatures are unlike anything we've ever faced. Our most advanced weapons cannot penetrate their bioarmor. They adapt to every attack we make, evolving defenses faster than we can develop new strategies. Lee exchanged glances with his crew. Kim was already moving toward the weapons locker, while Choi had pulled up Earth's extensive database of pest control methods on his engineering console. Ambassador, that's because you're fighting them wrong, Lee replied, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of a man who had spent years turning impossible situations into victories. Tell me, have you tried chemical warfare? Chemical warfare? Nexari sounded confused. Captain, these creatures have biological filters that can neutralize most toxins. They've adapted to survive in vacuum, extreme temperatures, and radiation levels that would kill most known life forms. Most known life forms, Lee repeated with a slight smile. But not Earth life forms. Kim, start manufacturing the special ammunition. I want armor-piercing rounds loaded with concentrated pesticides. Choi, I need you to synthesize every chemical compound in our pest control database. Park looked up from her station, confusion clear on her young face. Sir, I don't understand. These are highly advanced alien creatures with sophisticated bioarmor and adaptive capabilities. How are pesticides going to help? Lee turned to face his crew, his expression serious but determined. Because Park, no matter how advanced they think they are, no matter how much they've evolved or adapted, they're still bugs. Back on Earth, we've been dealing with bugs for thousands of years. The captain moved to the tactical display, pointing at the swarming bioships. Look at their movement patterns. Look at how they organize their attacks. They're operating like a hive mind, just like the insects we've been fighting on Earth since we first started farming. The only difference is scale. Kim was already at the fabrication bay, his experienced hands working with practiced efficiency as he began modifying their standard mining charges. "Sir, I can have the first batch of chemical rounds ready in 30 minutes. But I have to ask, are we really going to try to fumigate an entire star system?" "That's exactly what we're going to do," Lee replied. "Choi, what do you have for me?" Engineer looked up from his console, his face showing a mixture of amazement and horror. "Captain, I've run preliminary scans on the Ravager biosignatures. Their cellular structure is actually remarkably similar to several Earth's insect species. If I modify our industrial-grade insecticides to account for their size in the vacuum of space, I think we can create compounds that will be highly toxic to their biology." "How toxic?" Kim asked, loading another chemical round into the fabrication chamber. Letho Choi replied simply, "These creatures may have adapted to resist energy weapons and conventional explosives, but I don't think they've ever encountered Earth-based neurotoxins. Their nervous systems are actually more primitive than what we've dealt with in the Australian bug wars." Park shook her head in amazement. "This is insane. We're talking about taking on an alien invasion force with bug spray and explosives. Die." "Best kind of insane," Kim laughed, his scarred face showing genuine enthusiasm for the first time since they'd arrived. "Back home, my grandfather used to tell stories about the old days when humans had to fight off swarms of locusts to protect their crops. He always said the secret wasn't to fight them one at a time, but to poison the whole swarm at once." Lee nodded approvingly. "Exactly. These Ravagers think they're apex predators because they've never faced a species that evolved alongside insects. They've never had to develop countermeasures against chemical warfare designed specifically to target arthropod biology." The Iron Dawn's fabrication bay hummed with activity as the crew worked with desperate efficiency. Mining charges were converted into chemical delivery systems. Industrial solvents were refined into concentrated neurotoxins. Standard kinetic rounds were hollowed out and filled with compounds that would make any Earth entomologist proud. Choi called out, "I've also synthesized something special. Remember the fungal infection that wiped out the Martian hive beetles? I've modified the spores to target the Ravager bioships. If we can get close enough to deploy it, it should spread through their organic holes like wildfire." "Now that's what I'm talking about," Lee said, watching his crew transform. "It's their exploration vessel into something that would give nightmares to every insect species in the galaxy. These Ravagers want to play the role of unstoppable alien invaders. Let's show them what happens when they mess with someone who knows how to deal with pest problems." Outside the viewports, the massive bioships continued their slow orbit around the dying world, unaware that death was coming for them in the form of the most effective exterminators the galaxy had ever seen. The Iron Dawn pierced through the poisonous green atmosphere of Kelvani Prime, like a bullet through diseased flesh. Captain Lee Dongmin stood on the bridge, watching as his ship's sensors painted a picture of absolute devastation below. The planet's surface crawled with alien life, writhing masses of organic tissue that had consumed entire cities and transformed them into something nightmarish. "Beginning atmospheric deployment," announced Communications Officer Park So-young, her fingers steady on the controls despite the horror surrounding them. "Chemical dispersal systems are online." Through the main viewport, Lee could see the first wave of their attack beginning. Dozens of modified mining charges erupted in the upper atmosphere, releasing clouds of concentrated pesticides that spread like green fog across the continent below. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The organic masses covering the planet's surface began to convulse. Massive tentacles that had been reaching toward the sky suddenly whipped frantically before going rigid. Biostructures that pulsed with alien life started to dissolve, their surfaces bubbling and melting as the Earth-designed neurotoxins did their deadly work. Deep beneath the planet's surface, in the reinforced bunker that served as the last stronghold of Kelvani civilization, Ambassador Thexari watched the tactical display with a mixture of amazement and horror. His aide Vector stood beside him, both aliens staring at readings that defied everything they thought they knew about warfare. They're poisoning the entire atmosphere, the X-ray whispered, his scaled hands trembling as he processed what he was seeing. The Ravager biomasses are dying, but they're killing everything else too. Above them, the sounds of the dying planet filtered through the bunker's reinforced walls. What had once been the chittering, clicking symphony of a million Ravager drones was now becoming a cacophony of death throes. The very air itself had become toxic to the alien invaders. Sir Vector said, his voice tight with disbelief. Our atmospheric processors are showing massive chemical contamination. These humans are using compounds we've never seen before. Some of these toxins are specifically designed to target arthropod nervous systems. The Iron Dawn settled into a low orbit, and Lieutenant Commander Kim Tae-ho prepared for the most unusual ground assault of his career. In the ship's cargo bay, he suited up alongside a team of combat engineers who looked more like industrial workers than soldiers. Their equipment included flamethrowers, chemical sprayers, and modified mining tools that had been converted into the galaxy's most effective pest control devices. Remember, Kim addressed his team through the CUM system. These things are big, but they're still bugs. Aim for the joints where their carapaces meet. That's where the neurotoxin will penetrate fastest. Sergeant Oh Hyun-woo, a grizzled veteran of the Martian colony wars, checked his chemical sprayer one final time. Sir, I've fought bioweapons before, but nothing like this. These Ravagers have turned an entire planet into their nest. Then we'll fumigate the whole nest, Kim replied grimly. It's just like clearing out a warehouse back home. The drop pods launched from the Iron Dawn like seeds of destruction, piercing through the toxic atmosphere toward predetermined targets on the surface. As they descended, the humans could see the true scope of the Ravager infestation. Entire mountain ranges had been consumed and transformed into massive hive structures. Cities had become breeding grounds, where millions of new drones were being spawned. Kim's pod hit the surface with a bone-jarring impact, crushing through what had once been the roof of a Kelvani government building. As the pod's doors hissed open, he emerged into a nightmare landscape. The familiar architecture of an alien city had been grotesquely transformed, with organic growths covering every surface and strange pulsing sacs hanging from twisted spires. Contact front. O's voice crackled through the CUM as his team encountered their first Ravagers. The creatures emerged from hidden alcoves in the alien architecture, each one the size of a small car, but moving with the fluid grace of a predatory insect. Their carapaces gleamed with an oily sheen, and their multiple eyes fixed on the humans with alien intelligence. Light 'em up, Kim ordered, raising his chemical sprayer. The humans opened fire with weapons that would have been laughed at by any conventional military force. Instead of plasma bolts or kinetic rounds, they sprayed clouds of concentrated pesticide. The effect on the Ravagers was immediate and devastating. The creature's bioarmor, which had shrugged off the Kelvani's most advanced energy weapons, began to bubble and dissolve under the chemical assault. The lead Ravager stumbled, its nervous system overwhelmed by neurotoxins specifically designed to target arthropod biology. Its legs gave out and it collapsed in a twitching heap as its own biology turned against it. The others tried to retreat. The chemical clouds spread faster than they could move. Back in the underground bunker, Vexari watched the tactical display with growing amazement and horror. How are they doing this? He whispered to his aide. Our plasma cannons couldn't even scratch those carapaces. They're not using weapons, sir, Vector replied, his voice filled with horrified fascination. They're using ... exterminators. On the surface, engineer Choi Minho had set up a mobile laboratory in what had once been the city's central plaza. Equipment was a bizarre mixture of high-tech synthesizers and industrial chemical processing units. Kelvani survivors, emerging cautiously from hidden shelters, watched in stunned silence as the young human worked with casual efficiency to create new batches of alien-specific poison. The fascinating thing about these Ravagers, Choi explained to a group of Kelvani observers, seemingly oblivious to their horrified expressions, is that their biology is actually pretty simple once you understand the basics. Carbon-based life forms with silicon-enhanced exoskeletons and standard insectoid nervous systems. A Kelvani scientist, his scales pale with shock, approached the human engineer. You speak of them as if they were common pests. These creatures have conquered 17 worlds. They've adapted to every weapon we could deploy against them. Choi looked up from his work, his young face showing genuine puzzlement. Well, yeah, they're pests. Really big pests, but still pests. We dealt with similar problems on Earth during the Australian bug wars. Granted, those insects were only about this big. He held up his fingers to show a space of a few centimeters, but the principles are the same. You fought wars against insects. His voice came through the communication link, filled with disbelief. Had to, Choi replied casually, returning to his chemical synthesis. They were eating our crops, destroying our ecosystems, threatening our food supply. We learned pretty quickly that the only way to deal with an insect infestation is total elimination. You can't negotiate with bugs, you can't reason with them. You just have to kill them all. The Kelvani observers exchanged glances of growing unease. These humans spoke of genocide with the casual tone of pest control workers discussing a routine job. There was no hatred in their voices, no anger or desire for revenge. They were simply solving a problem with the most effective tools available. These aren't simple insects, the Kelvani scientists protested. They have advanced biotechnology, adaptive capabilities. Collective intelligence? So did the Martian hive beetles, Choi interrupted, not looking up from his work. The Australian super locusts and the Antarctic ice wasps. The thing about Earth is that we've been dealing with aggressive insect species for our entire evolutionary history. We've gotten really good at it. Above them, the sounds of Kim's ground assault continued. The humans moved through the infested city like professional exterminators, methodically clearing each building, each nest, each breeding ground. Their approach was systematic, efficient, and utterly without mercy. The key, Choi continued, mixing another batch of neurotoxin, is understanding that no matter how big they get, no matter how much they evolve, they're still operating on basic insect behavioral patterns. Hive mind, reproductive cycles, territorial instincts. Once you understand the biology, the rest is just a matter of scale. The chemical clouds continued to spread across the planet's surface, carrying death to every ravager they touched. It seemed like an unstoppable alien invasion was rapidly becoming an extermination job. Handled with the casual professionalism of humans who had spent millennia learning how to kill things that crawled, buzzed and swarmed, and in the depths of space. The massive bioships orbiting the planet began to show signs of distress as the toxic atmosphere below started to affect their organic hulls. Captain Lee Dongmin stood motionless on the bridge of the Iron Dawn, his eyes locked on the tactical display that showed the systematic destruction of an entire world. 12 hours had passed since they began their extermination operation, and the results were beyond anything he had expected. What had started as a desperate rescue mission had evolved into the most effective pest control operation in Galactic history. The main view screen displayed a real-time satellite view of Kelvani Prime's surface, where massive organic growths had writhed with alien life just hours before. Now only smoking craters and dissolving biomatter remained. The green clouds of pesticide continued to drift across continents, carrying death to every ravager they touched. Status report, Lee ordered, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man who had orchestrated the impossible. Communications Officer Park So-young looked up from her station, her young face showing a mixture of amazement and exhaustion. Sector 7 is completely clear, sir. The aerial pesticide drops eliminated 99.7% of the surface biomass. Ground teams are mopping up the remaining pockets with flamethrowers and concentrated neurotoxins. Lieutenant Commander Kim Tae-ho approached the command station, his scarred face grim as he studied the tactical readouts. Sector 12 is showing heavy resistance. Deep scans are detecting multiple Queen signatures in underground hive complexes. The bastards have dug in deep, probably using the planet's natural cave systems. Lee nodded, his mind already working through the tactical implications. The Ravagers were adapting faster than expected, retreating to protected positions where the atmospheric pesticides couldn't reach them, but that was fine. Humans had been dealing with burrowing pests for centuries. Engineer Choi Min-ho looked up from his engineering console, his hands still working to synthesize new chemical compounds. "Sir, I've prepared a special cocktail. Remember the fungal infection that wiped out the Martian hive beetles? I've modified. It's specifically for Ravager biology. Once it gets into their underground ventilation systems, it'll spread through the entire hive network. Deep beneath the planet's surface, in the reinforced bunker that had become the Kelvani government's final stronghold, Ambassador Thixari and his remaining staff watched the tactical display with growing horror and fascination. The human approach to warfare was unlike anything in their cultural memory. "They're carpet bombing the entire northern continent," whispered Victor, his aide, his scaled hands trembling as he processed the sensor readings. "They're destroying everything. The cities, the forests, the very bedrock itself." Thixari watched as massive explosions rippled across his homeworld's surface. Ancient cities that had stood for thousands of years were being systematically obliterated, their ruins disappearing beneath clouds of toxic smoke and chemical fire. For a moment, grief overwhelmed him as he watched his civilization's heritage being erased. "They're destroying everything," Victor repeated, his voice breaking. "No," Thixari corrected, his voice filled with grim understanding as he watched a Ravager bioship crash into the planet's surface, its organic hull dissolving from chemical exposure. "They're saving what can be saved. Better a scarred world than no world at all." On the surface, the human ground teams moved through the devastated landscape with the methodical efficiency of professional exterminators. They wore full environmental suits that made them look like mechanical specters in the toxic atmosphere, carrying equipment that ranged from industrial flamethrowers to modified mining charges, loaded with biological weapons. Sergeant O. Hyenwu led Alpha Team through the ruins of what had once been Kelvani Prime's capital city. The familiar architecture had been grotesquely transformed by the Ravager infestation, with organic growths covering every surface and strange pulsing chambers built into the sides of buildings. But now, under the assault of human-designed toxins, the alien modifications were dissolving back into their component chemicals. "Motion sensors are picking up massive movement below ground," reported Private Yang Sujin, her voice crackling through the comm system. "Looks like we've found their main hive complex." O studied his tactical display, noting the vast network of tunnels that stretched 4 kilometers beneath the city. "Command, this is Alpha Team. We've located the primary hive, requesting permission to deploy bunker busters." "Permission granted," came Kim's voice through the comm. "Hit them with everything we've got." The charges detonated in sequence, each explosion carefully timed to create a cascading collapse that would bury the Ravager. Tunnels under millions of tons of rock and debris, but that was only the beginning. As the dust settled, automated dispensers began releasing clouds of weaponized fungal spores into the remaining tunnel openings, 3 kilometers below the surface. In a natural cavern that had been expanded into a massive breeding chamber, the Ravager primary queen felt the first tremors of the human assault. She was a nightmare made manifest, creature 50 meters long with a bloated abdomen that pulsed with the constant production of new drones. Her multiple eyes, each one the size of a dinner plate, fixed on the tunnel entrances as the first clouds of toxic spores began to drift into her domain. For the first time since the Ravager invasion began, the primary queen experienced something. That might have been fear. O's team rappelled down through a blast crater that had opened a direct path to the Queen's chamber. Their suit lights cut through the darkness, revealing walls that writhed with organic tissue and pools of biomatter that had once been Kelvani civilians. The air itself seemed alive, thick with spores and chemical vapors that would have killed any unprotected organism instantly. "Jesus," Yang muttered, her voice tight with disgust. "This place is like something out of a nightmare." "That's a big bug," O observed with professional detachment as they entered the Queen's chamber. The massive creature dominated the space, her alien bulk supported by dozens of smaller drones that tended to her egg-laying process. The Queen's head turned toward them, her alien intelligence recognizing the threat they represented. She let out a sound that was part screech, part psychic scream, calling for her defenders. But the drones that responded moved sluggishly, Their nervous system's already compromised by the fungal toxins filling the air. Just means we need more. Poison, O replied, raising his chemical sprayer. Light her up. The concentrated neurotoxins struck the queen's carapace like acid rain, eating through bioarmor that had evolved to resist energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. Her death scream echoed through the hive network, a psychic shriek of agony that was felt by every ravager on the planet above ground. Kim watched his tactical display as Queen's signatures across the planet began to wink out one by one. Had located and eliminated 7 primary queens, 12 secondary breeding females, and over 300 warrior-class defenders. The Ravager hive mind, dependent on the psychic coordination provided by their queens, began to collapse like a house of cards. All primary queens are down, Kim reported to the bridge. Remaining drone populations are going into death spasms. The hive mind is collapsing. On the Iron Dawn's bridge, Lee allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. Just like termites. Back home, cut off the head, the body dies. Park looked up from her communications station, her expression showing amazement at the speed of their victory. Sir, I'm receiving surrender transmissions from the bioships in orbit. Without the queens to coordinate them, they're reverting to basic survival instincts. No prisoners, Lee ordered coldly. These aren't soldiers, they're pests. The job, the final phase of the operation, was almost anticlimactic. The massive bioships, deprived of their hive mind coordination, drifted helplessly in orbit as human chemical weapons ate through their organic hulls. One by one they broke apart and burned up in the planet's atmosphere, their remains adding to the toxic clouds that continued to cleanse the surface below. In the depths of space, other bioships that had been approaching the system suddenly changed course, their primitive survival instincts overriding their programmed aggression. The Ravager horde, which had seemed unstoppable just days before, was fleeing in terror from a single human vessel. The extermination was complete. An entire species that had conquered 17 worlds had been eliminated in less than 24 hours by 12 humans with the right tools and the knowledge of how to use them. Earth's reputation as a death world was about to take on an entirely new meaning across the galaxy. 3 months had passed since the Iron Dawn first entered Kelvani space, and the transformation was absolute. Captain Lee Dongmin stood on what had once been the observation deck of the Kelvani Grand Assembly, now converted into a human command center overlooking the rebuilt capital city. The view through the reinforced windows showed a world that was alive but utterly changed. The organic growths that had covered every surface were gone, dissolved into harmless chemicals that had been processed and recycled into building materials. Where twisted alien architectures had once dominated the skyline, practical human structures now rose from the sterile ground. Gray concrete buildings, efficient transportation networks, and atmospheric processing plants stretched to the horizon. The air was clean, scrubbed by massive filtration systems that hummed day and night, but it carried the sharp scent of industrial chemicals and sterilization compounds. The water was pure, processed through multiple purification stages that removed every trace of alien contamination. But it tasted of chlorine and synthetic additives. That made the Kelvani survivors wince with every sip. Engineer Choi Min-ho approached with his ever-present datapad, his young face showing the satisfaction of a job nearly complete. Captain, we've restored basic habitability to 60% of the planet's surface. The remaining areas still show trace amounts of Ravager biomatter, but another 6 months of decontamination should clear them completely. Lee nodded, studying the progress reports. The numbers were impressive by any standard. An entire world cleansed of alien infestation, its ecosystem rebuilt from the ground up, its atmosphere restored to breathable standards. By human standards, it was a textbook example of successful terraforming and pest control. By Kelvani standards, it was the death of everything they had ever known. Ambassador Thexari emerged from the elevator that had replaced the elegant anti-gravity lift system that once served the building. His blue scales had regained some of their luster over the past months, and proper nutrition had restored his health. but his amber eyes held a depth of sadness that no amount of physical recovery could heal. "Captain Lee," he said, his voice carrying formal gratitude mixed with something harder to define, "I wanted to speak with you before your departure. Our species owes you a debt that can never be repaid. You've saved us from complete extinction." Lee turned from the window, his expression showing the same professional courtesy he had maintained throughout the operation. "No debt, Ambassador. We were just doing our job." "Your job?" Nexaria's head tilted in that distinctly alien gesture of confusion. "Captain, you eliminated an enemy that had conquered 17 worlds. You accomplished in days what our greatest military minds said was impossible." "Pest control," Lee replied with a slight smile that held no warmth. "Though I have to admit, this was one of the bigger jobs we've handled. Usually we're dealing with localized infestations, not system-wide problems." The casual way Lee spoke about the complete extinction of an entire species sent a chill through the scaled spine. The humans had approached the Ravager threat with the same emotional detachment that a homeowner might show toward termites in their basement, efficient, thorough, and utterly without mercy. Through the window, they could see Kelvani survivors moving through the rebuilt streets. They wore humanized clothing made from synthetic materials that were more durable than anything their original culture had produced. They lived in human-designed homes that were perfectly climate-controlled and completely sterile. They ate human-designed food that provided optimal nutrition but bore no resemblance to the delicate flavors that had once defined their cuisine. The survivors were alive, healthy, and safe. They were also living in a world that felt as alien to them as any distant planet. Captain Exari said carefully, "May I ask you something? When you look at what you've accomplished here, what do you see?" Lee considered the question, his gaze sweeping across the rebuilt cityscape. "I see a successful remediation project. Hostile life forms eliminated, environmental hazards neutralized, basic infrastructure restored to functional standards. By any measure, this operation exceeded expectations." "And when you look at my people, survivors," Lee replied without hesitation, "you're alive. Your species will continue. Your children will grow up in a world free from the threat of alien parasites. That's what matters, Lieutenant Commander." Kim Taeho joined them on the observation deck, his scarred face showing the satisfaction of a soldier whose mission was complete. "Captain, the Iron Dawn is ready for departure. All equipment secured, decontamination procedures complete. We're ready to move out?" Lee's personal communicator chimed with an incoming priority transmission. He activated the device, and the voice of Admiral Harrison filled the room with the authority of Earth Command. "Captain Lee, we've been monitoring your operation from the beginning. Outstanding work. The complete elimination of the Ravager threat has sent shockwaves through the galactic community. We're receiving requests from 17 different species asking for pest control services." "Acknowledged," Admiral Lee replied. "We'll handle them." The Admiral's voice took on a more serious tone. "Lee, some of these species are calling you the exterminators of the galaxy. Intelligence reports suggest there's growing fear about human capabilities. Does that concern you?" Lee looked out at the scarred but living world below, then at his crew preparing for their next mission. Kim was already reviewing tactical data for their next assignment. Choi was updating his chemical synthesis databases with lessons learned from the Ravager operation. Communications Officer Park So-young was coordinating with other human vessels that were being deployed to handle similar threats across the galaxy. "Sir, when you have a pest problem, you call an exterminator. That's what we do. If other species find that concerning, maybe they should invest more in preventive measures." The transmission ended, and the humans began their final preparations. For departure, they moved with the efficient professionalism of contractors who had completed one job and were ready to move on to the next. There were no ceremonies, no emotional farewells, no philosophical discussions about the implications of what they had accomplished. They had come, they had solved the problem, and now they were leaving, as the Iron Dawn lifted off from the planet's surface, its engines leaving trails of superheated plasma in the sterile atmosphere. Ambassador Thesari stood at the window watching humanity's departure. The ship rose through the artificial clouds of the atmospheric processors, past the orbital platforms that continued to monitor and maintain the planet's new ecosystem, and finally disappeared into the starfield beyond. The galaxy would never be the same. Word of the Ravager extinction spread through the galactic communication networks faster than any ship could travel. Species that had never heard of humans suddenly found themselves studying classified reports about the death world called Earth. Military strategists tried to understand how 12 individuals had accomplished what entire fleets could not. Xenobiologists struggled to comprehend the casual way humans approach biological warfare. But for species facing their own impossible enemies, the message was clear. Somewhere in the galaxy, there were exterminators available for hire. They were efficient, thorough, and completely without mercy. They would save your world. But the price might be everything that made it worth saving. The Kelvani survivors would rebuild their civilization on the sterile foundation the humans had provided. Their children would grow up in safety, but they would never know the beauty of the crystal forests that had once covered their world. They would never taste the sweet nectar of the flowering vines that had been dissolved along with the Ravager biomatter. They would never hear the songs of the native birds that had been classified as potential disease vectors and eliminated as a precautionary measure. They were alive.
Oh.
But they were living in a museum of their former selves, and across the galaxy. Other species facing extinction began to whisper a new prayer into the cosmic darkness. Please, let the humans come. Because in a universe full of monsters, sometimes you needed bigger monsters on your side. Even if those monsters might save you in ways that left you wondering if salvation was worth the price, the age of human pest control had begun. And the galaxy would never be safe again. Not from the threats that stalked between the stars, and not from the cure that walked among them disguised as salvation. The end.